BRICS is an important group of countries. The name itself is an acronym. It stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. This group started as just an idea, a concept coined by an economist who saw the rising potential of these specific nations. Initially, it was just BRIC, with South Africa joining later in 2010, adding the S to the name and bringing an influential African voice into the fold. In a significant expansion, the bloc welcomed new members in 2024, including Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates, dramatically increasing its size and scope. These countries are spread across different continents, representing a diverse mix of cultures, economies, and political systems. The original members were grouped together because of their large, fast-growing economies. They were seen as the future engines of global economic growth. These nations also share other important characteristics. They all have large populations, giving them significant human capital and massive consumer markets. They also possess vast territories rich in natural resources, from Brazil's agricultural heartland and Russia's immense energy reserves to India's burgeoning tech sector and China's manufacturing might. This combination of population, resources, and economic dynamism is what first drew the world's attention to them and formed the basis of their collective identity. The primary goal of BRICS is to create a more balanced and fair global order. The members feel that key international institutions like the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund are dominated by Western powers, particularly the United States and Europe. They believe these institutions do not adequately represent the interests of developing nations. Therefore, BRICS aims to increase the influence of its members on the world stage. They want to reform the global financial system to give emerging economies a louder voice and a more significant role in making decisions that affect the entire world. To achieve these goals, BRICS has created its own institutions. The most notable of these is the New Development Bank, sometimes called the BRICS Bank. The NDB was established to fund infrastructure and sustainable development projects in member countries and other emerging economies. It offers an alternative to the Western-led World Bank and IMF. By pooling their resources, the BRICS nations are building a parallel system that allows them to pursue their development goals without relying solely on the established Western financial architecture, thereby increasing their collective self-sufficiency and influence. The Group of Seven, or G7, is a club of some of the world's most advanced economies. The members are Canada, France, Germany, Italy, Japan, the United Kingdom, and the United States. The European Union also participates as a non-enumerated member. Unlike BRICS, which began as an economic concept, the G7 started as an informal gathering of finance ministers in the 1970s to discuss the economic problems of the day, such as the oil crisis. It evolved into a formal summit for heads of state to coordinate policy on major global issues. Its membership has remained relatively stable, representing the core of the Western economic and political alliance. The G7 countries are bound by shared values. They are all liberal democracies with open societies and market-based economies. This common political and economic ideology is a cornerstone of their alliance. It allows them to find common ground more easily on a wide range of issues, from human rights and the rule of law to free trade and international security. Their meetings are a forum to reaffirm these shared principles and to project a united front on the world stage. For decades, the G7 has been seen as the steering committee for the global economy, setting the agenda for international policy. The primary objective of the G7 is to maintain global stability and prosperity, largely based on the liberal international order they helped build after World War II. They tackle pressing global challenges, including economic crises, climate change, security threats, and public health emergencies. For example, the G7 has been at the forefront of discussions on coordinating sanctions, providing financial aid to countries in crisis, and setting targets for reducing carbon emissions. Their goal is to manage the international system and ensure it continues to function smoothly, protecting the interests and values of its member states. The influence of the G7 comes from the immense economic power of its members. Combined, they represent a huge portion of global wealth, trade, and investment. Their currencies, especially the US dollar, dominate international finance. When the G7 makes a decision, it has a powerful ripple effect across the entire world. For instance, a G7 agreement on a global minimum corporate tax rate can reshape international business practices. Their long history of cooperation and their control over key international financial institutions give them a unique and powerful platform to shape global events and policy. When comparing BRICS and the G7, the most striking difference is in their economic and demographic scale. The expanded BRICS now represents a much larger portion of the world's population, covering about 45%. In terms of landmass and natural resources, BRICS also holds a significant advantage. The G7, on the other hand, still holds the lead in terms of nominal GDP and overall wealth. The G7 nations are highly developed, with high per capita incomes and advanced technological sectors. BRICS countries are mostly emerging economies, meaning their individual wealth is lower, but their collective economic growth rate has often outpaced that of the G7. Their goals and purposes also present a sharp contrast. The G7 is largely a status quo power. Its primary aim is to preserve and manage the existing global order from which its members have greatly benefited. They focus on maintaining stability and addressing challenges within the current framework. BRICS, in contrast, is a revisionist group. It seeks to change the global order, not overthrow it. The members believe the current system is tilted in favor of the West and want to create a more multipolar world where power is distributed more evenly. Their focus is on development, reform, and creating alternatives to Western-dominated institutions. Politically, the two groups are very different. The G7 is a homogeneous bloc of liberal democracies with a long history of military and political alliance, particularly through organizations like NATO. This shared political system makes it easier for them to agree on issues related to democracy and human rights. BRICS is politically diverse. It includes democracies like Brazil and India, an authoritarian state like China, and countries with unique political systems like Russia and Iran. This diversity can sometimes make it difficult to reach a consensus on political issues, so they tend to focus more on economic and financial cooperation. Their influence on the world stage is exercised in different ways. The G7's power is institutional and financial. They wield influence through their control of the World Bank, the IMF, and the Global Financial Messaging System, SWIFT. Their decisions can directly impact global markets and international law. BRICS's influence is growing and is based more on its massive market size, its role as a major producer of goods and commodities, and its efforts to build alternative financial structures like the NDB. They are challenging the G7's dominance not through direct confrontation, but by building a parallel system. The question of whether BRICS is a direct rival to the G7 is complex. In many ways, it is becoming one. The creation of the new development bank is a clear challenge to the financial dominance of the World Bank. Discussions within BRICS about trading in local currencies are a direct attempt to reduce reliance on the US dollar, which is a cornerstone of G7 power. On the political front, BRICS members often provide alternative viewpoints to the G7 on international conflicts, such as those in the Middle East, showcasing a growing divide in global diplomacy. This competition is not just economic, it is a contest over ideas and the future direction of the world. However, it is not a simple zero-sum game. The economies of BRICS and the G7 are deeply interconnected. China is a top trading partner for almost every G7 country. India's technology sector is deeply integrated with Western economies. For this reason, a full-blown confrontation would be mutually destructive. There are also global issues such as climate change, pandemics, and nuclear proliferation that require cooperation between both groups. No single bloc can solve these problems alone. Therefore, we are likely to see a future of both competition and necessary cooperation, a complex relationship that shifts depending on the issue at hand. Looking ahead, the influence of BRICS is set to grow. The recent expansion has already increased its economic weight and geopolitical footprint. As the economies of countries like India continue to expand, and as the bloc potentially adds more members, its collective power will become harder to ignore. The G7, while still incredibly powerful, faces challenges of slower growth and internal political divisions. It will have to adapt to a world where it is no longer the only group setting the rules. The G7 will likely remain a powerful voice for liberal democracies, but it may have to share the stage more than it has in the past. In my view, the world is moving away from a unipolar moment dominated by the West and towards a multipolar reality. BRICS and the G7 represent the two most significant poles in this emerging order. The future will not be defined by one group defeating the other, but by how they manage their relationship. The ideal outcome would be a balance of power where both groups compete economically but cooperate on shared global threats. The great challenge of the 21st century will be to manage this complex rivalry to avoid conflict and build a more stable, inclusive, and prosperous world for everyone.